Hello, Mike. We are just getting on. Thank you for being an early bird. Just making sure that our speakers get the link to join as well. Let me see, how many are we? Pictish 1, Mike. Very good. Welcome, early birds. So let me see, start my video there. Okay, so welcome to the mushroom webinar, Intro to Mushroom webinar tonight. And Carlin, McKee, Dustin is her husband, and both of them run this mushroom farm called Greenwood Farm. They will be joining us in a moment, and I think Carlin's going to come in early because she wants to make sure that her sound and sight connections are good coming from her barn, where they are. We tried a tech run earlier in the week and we did not film from her barn, so I hope everything goes well. But there, welcome. And now for the two of you, since you're early, there is a chat box at the bottom of your screen. If you have any questions about mushrooms that you want Carlin to answer, she knows to look at this screen, so just type them in there. We have a bunch of questions as well coming from other people, so I'm going to type them from in that the people have emailed. So I'm going to type them in there as well, so that later on we can reference them at 8 o'clock. So if you want to try out, and so to get the ball rolling here, with 3 people here, but just go ahead and type in Mike and Pictish 1, where are you growing from, or where are you growing, and have you ever grown mushrooms before? You can use the chat box to do that, to answer the question. Don't be shy. I can also unmute you and you can speak if you'd like. I think Pictish 1, you are unmuted. I just can't hear make sure my sounds are on. Okay. Pictish 1, if you want to. I'm not being shy. No worries, no worries. Yeah, definitely take your time, put in the questions as you see fit, and I am just gonna make sure that Carlin has the link to join. Another email. We are a few minutes early, about 9 minutes early. Usually we use this time to just get to know the people who are hopping online earlier and see where you're going from. So this is like the community aspect of it. Okay. And Thomas, welcome. Thank you for my tea, Dave. The first thing Carlin asked me when we did a tech run on Monday was, what did you have for dinner? So I have ashwagandha tea here. Williamsport, PA is home. My environment is not all that good for growing mushrooms yet. No worries. Yeah, let's find out what environment we need. Maybe there are more ways than one to grow mushrooms, I wonder. I am not that familiar with mushrooms either. We just started growing mushrooms this year, and the main mushroom grower has been Dave. But in this evening, to answer that question about dinner, I decided to incorporate mushrooms in our dinner. So we made a tom kha soup, which is a Thai soup. I'm not from Thailand, I'm from the Philippines, but we do use shiitake mushrooms a lot. And here's a shiitake mushroom. And if you guys, I know I said this in the email, there is no workbook for this webinar that's free, because the workbook Carlin wrote up on their website, it's $4. It's totally worth it, especially if you have kids, to identify mushrooms, like what their kind of cap they have. So I'm guessing this is a convex cap mushroom. Just try to learn a bit more about the mushroom morphology. This mushrooms are definitely a different different kingdom altogether. Hello, Dave and Sandy. Welcome. I hope this is Sandy Steinfeld from Arizona. But I was just showing them the mushroom, and the kids and I were analyzing what kind of mushroom this was. Well, it's a shiitake mushroom and the parts of it. And so underneath you see the gills, and the gills drop the spores. I'm only relearning this now from the Mycology packet that Carlin sells on her website. So yes, the gills here are crowded, I believe. Sometimes the gills can be separated by, I don't know how many. We'll ask Carlin later. So I wonder if Carlin has received our link to join, Dave. If you don't mind checking to see that she's okay. I think she gave us 2 emails to use for Zoom, and I was trying to find that second email. So I sent it to the Greenwood Farm email. I think she has another personal email that she wanted to use for the Zoom call. Maybe she's just setting up. Other considerations. Okay. I don't want to give away her whole her whole packet, but just for the shiitake mushroom. So this is called the stalk, and it's attached here in a tapering way. And we have grown shiitakes as well in a mushroom kit, right, Dave? Remus, welcome. So we're just waiting on Carlin. We are about 5 minutes early.
Wait a minute. I think she's having some connection issues. Let me just email her.
Okay. All right. Well, we won't bother you for now, Dave. But yeah, so right now, another thing that's interesting about Carlin and Dustin is they are applying for a USDA grant so that their historic timber frame barn, in which they conduct these seminars or workshops about how mushroom inoculation can be updated. And so if you find value in this webinar, they would love to have like a letter of support from you guys so that they can continue doing their work and get the community. Right now, they're growing a community of people who are learning how to grow mushrooms in the Pennsylvania Millville area, and they're also supplying the restaurants there with gourmet mushrooms, such as right now the season is maitake, of course. So I think they recently just got the only certified, like they're certified to sell it, so they got the first license to sell it to restaurants there, and so that has made them really busy. So go ahead and let's see. If you guys, there's a good group of people here already, if you want to go ahead and tell us a little bit more about your mushroom background. I know Remus here is a mushroom guy that we'd love to have you on sometimes, Remus, and tell us about mushrooms yourself. So what mushroom adventures have you been on lately?
My Taki season is gangbusters this year from all the rain. So they're collected like 10 or 11 today. They're smaller. I mean, ones that I saw that were like really small and was hoping that they'd come back and be really huge, but they've grown. They're just we had them kind of trigger and start fruiting early, and then it got really warm for a while. So some of them did not do so well because of the mid 80 days are not particularly favorable for my talking. They love weather like this, but they kind of got the memo to fruit early. Which, in some cases is good. Usually it's right around this time where we'll start seeing fruits or, where they're coming up to size up through the end of October. But so I've been dehydrating, cooking like crazy, giving a ton away, and making lots of jerky. So I'm on my sixth recipe of jerky. And in fact, I've got the dehydrator running outside because it's it's so aromatic. It's just so powerful. So when you would cook them, like boil them, simmer them for like 10 minutes, and it helps open up the cellular structure so they'll absorb more of the marinade. Marinate them for like 24 hours and then put them in the dehydrator. And it's, anywhere from 12 to 18 hours in the dehydrator to get them just before they're really crispy. So, just been going nuts with that. It's been insane.
Oh my goodness. And thank you, Remus, for sharing that. We've already learned so much just listening to you. Like I said, you're like,
get in the woods while you can. Now is the time to go fill a basket. I have my huge basket, but I also take like 3 IKEA bags with me. And the one day I filled them all up. So it was like, I came back and Rasa wanted to kind of shoot me because she's like, what am I supposed to do with all this? Well, let's pass it around. Let's give it away to different people. So.
Oh my goodness. Well, thank you, Remus. I want you to meet and Mike and Pictish and Thomas and Adam, Sandy, Sheila, Stan, Mary, Karen, Anwar, Marilyn, Sherry, Dan, and somebody on the phone, and Jennifer Bond and your son Jake, who I see right now. I want you to meet Carlin and Dustin McKee. So is this Carlin? Are you? Yes, you are. Who are? Let me unmute you, Carlin. Huh, yes. And I don't know how to make your screen bigger, but go ahead and talk.
Not cutting off. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, there we go.
Great. All right. Wonderful.
Well, okay, so to introduce you, oh my goodness, and now I have to go and see where that text that you sent me was, but I should have been prepared. Dustin and Carlin McKee are a husband and wife power team from Millville, Pennsylvania, who recently were cited in the Forbes magazine as being a daring young couple to successfully promote this mushroom business, start this mushroom business, but they have been in several businesses for the last 10 years, in carpentry and woodworking and farming. And Carlin and Dustin homeschool their 3 kids, and they run this business, which is growing really rapidly. And they want to bring the mushroom education to more people. So welcome, Carlin. Thank you so much for what you're doing. This, by the way, is like a special treat because normally people come to their barn and this is what you guys teach, right? This is your mushroom workshop that's normally paid. So we're very, very honored to have you tonight. Now, take it away.
Yeah. So I was really glad that some people wrote in some questions already, but I thought I could start with some basic mycology. And I also noticed that people had bought the basic mycology packet in advance. And that's a product that I made to help people feel comfortable even using a guidebook, because I don't know if you ever picked one up, but there's a lot of information in there. It can be quite overwhelming, especially if you're curious about mushrooms and you're wondering, that some can be deadly. So it's a helpful thing to be able to learn how to identify mushrooms. So I just want to start with this first page. I don't know if you can see it. It's the basic mycology cycle. So you all know that mushrooms start from spores that come out of a full-grown mushroom. A mushroom is much more like an apple is to a tree than you realize. It's really just the mechanism for the mycelium that lives underground or within the log to spread its spores. These are some oyster mushrooms that I harvested today outdoors on some logs. And you can see the dark caps, but you can see the gills, how they've started to come up. These ones are ready to drop their spores. So when we cultivate mushrooms intentionally, we want certain features in them. We want them to be thick in the cap. We want them to have certain flavors or like a good shelf life. So we want a bit more of intention in the strain. And that's why in modern cultivation, we use the mycelium. And that's what our plug spawn is about here. This is our plug spawn, the product. And that's what I wanted to demonstrate tonight. These are hardwood dowels that have the mycelium on them. Can you see the white? That's the fibers of the mycelium. So spores, when they are blown out, they start to generate and link together. And that's what makes the hypha. that's what makes the threads of the mycelium. And then as that becomes more and more dense, it creates a knot. It's called the hyphal knot. And that's what turns into the mushroom. Don't know if I have a picture of that part. It's kind of over on this side of that chart. So that's some basic mycology there. There's two ways that people most commonly cultivate at home. For our larger cultivation on a bigger scale, there's slightly different processes, but the basics are the same. This is one of our countertop kits here. And basically what we do is we make very large countertop kits. And we actually only have 4 of these left for the season, 3 or 4. And they're basically like a modern way to do it is plastic bags, but we've been working with farmers around the world. I have a friend in Bhutan that's doing basically the same thing with compressed straw. You can either use straw or hardwood as the substrate, and it needs to be pasteurized. That's the most tricky part that limits a lot of people being able to cultivate more at home, or the real setback for large farms is being able to pasteurize it so there's not other spores in there to compete with it. So this product is pretty amazing because basically you just spray it. That's what's critical for mushrooms to grow, is they need moisture, they need humidity, and they actually need light for these kinds of mushrooms. There's primary decomposers or secondary decomposers, and these need light. They grow in logs and hardwood, or they can grow in some, like the straw mulch kind of stuff. But yeah, so this is a countertop kit, and I actually found one that I've been raising. We take pictures of them periodically for the website. This is its 4th flush, and I just noticed today that it's got it on there. I don't know if you can see it with the camera, but a little tiny. So in about, I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 days, that'll be ready to harvest. And all the care is basically this. You just spray it as much as you can, depending on how wet your house is, or humid, how warm it is, what kind of heat source you have. Those are the things that really limits it. But I was surprised to notice today, great timing, that it got its 4th flush, and I hadn't done anything but just left it on the shelf. So we've had customers that they've had it just grown out of the box. They completely forgot about it. So that's kind of fun. But the logs is what we're here for tonight, mostly. And I wanted to really show you this because it seems like it could be pretty hard, but it's actually quite simple, especially once you see it. Should I ask if there's questions now, or should we wait till the end?
I had a super quick question. You mentioned pasteurizing, but do you pasteurize the kits or do you sterilize the kits?
Yeah, we use sterilized hardwood sawdust, so it comes that way. Yeah, we have made them with straw in the past, and we had to pasteurize them then.
Okay, I wasn't sure if you were pasteurizing or sterilizing, because I know there's a difference when you, especially with like straw, if you pasteurize it, that some of the beneficial bacteria are still there versus completely sterilizing where it kills everything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's also some experimentation now with fermenting straw for the same thing.
Yeah.
And more of a yield, but it takes a lot longer too. But in third world countries, or people that have low tech systems, that's usually what they end up trying.
Do you mean like with like hydrated like lime?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Hydrated lime, and keeping it submerged underwater for a long period of time, it helps it ferment. It limits the bacteria growth to the ones that are beneficial.
Awesome. Okay, cool.
I just have one question as well from one person in the UK, Claire, who said, can the mushrooms you are using in this webinar be used where they live in the UK or the Eastern Mediterranean?
Yeah, sometimes there's shipping problems with the US, but oyster mushrooms are found in almost a whole world. But they're even found in Hawaii, but we're not able to ship there for, it's complicated. So that's more of what limits it. But there are mushroom farms starting in like a lot of European countries. There's definitely an interest, especially in Pakistan and Africa, to supplement diets. So it's been fun to talk with more farmers about ways that they can do it. There's some really good articles out there too, if you do a quick search for them.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead. We'll answer the rest of the questions maybe later.
Okay, all right, so I just want to demonstrate some log inoculation now. So basically, you're going to use these plugs. Let me see the scissors here. So you can keep these in the fridge until you're ready to use them. And then when you get them out, you can see that they'll have some grains in there to help them grow. Oops. They'll have some grains in there just to help supplement the nutrition. We use from Susquehanna Mills, it's a local farm, we use their sorghum, and then sometimes we use oats too because it's a little bit more food for the heavy feeder varieties. So this is the size of it. It's not too big, not too scary. And the best tip is that you need a 5/16 drill bit, and you want it to be able to have either this type of an end, or it can have more of like the more angles to it. It's a spade bit, I think is what it's called. I'm not quite sure. But the tip is to put tape where you're going to stop drilling. So this is how you measure it too. You can use a tool, but you see you put a little bit after. This is even a little bit deeper. But you want to leave a little room for when you're drilling in case the sawdust compacts in there, because you want this to be flush with the edge of the log. I'll show you what I mean. So you get the log, and you want to be about 6 inches away from the edge. Can you see this okay? Okay, so I did one here just for practice drilling. So I want to go 6 inches away from that. So you see as I went in and out, it pulls the sawdust out to kind of leave the hole a little bit cleaner. And then you just go 6 inches again. Okay, and you do that down the whole log, and then you turn it. And then these are where the spot is for the last time, and you make like a diamond pattern between there, and then you go down the whole row like that. So that's the drilling part. So I want to show you the tapping part. There's the hammer. Oh, there's the hammer. All right. So when you inoculate the log, you can pull off any of the little threads that are in there, but you insert it and you just tap it. That's it. Okay, so you fill them and then you turn it and you drill some more, tap and fill, or you could do it all tapping at the end, however you want. So that's that part. The last part is to seal it so there's no other spores that can come in there. And I think the crock pot is off the side. We put our wax in a crock pot, just a little one here, and that keeps it nice and warm during all of our log inoculation sessions. And we have these really simple paintbrushes, and you seal it up. And you want to coat it thoroughly so that no other spores get in there. And then you do that with the whole row. And then the ends, you want to make sure you seal those. So this is the messy part. This is why I think it's fun to come to a class, because you get to leave all the wax everywhere. But it's not too hard to clean up. But if you put newspapers down, so you want to use a big brush for this part, and you just coat the end of this brushes. It's got hard wax on it already. But you get the idea anyway. So you just coat it really well. And the most important thing is that it's thorough. So you actually want to make sure you get all the edge completely saturated, seal it up so there's no little log parts showing. All right, and then you'll want to inspect the log and see if there's any cracks in there, because that's what the mushroom is doing. As the mycelium fills the log, it's looking for a break to make through the log to send out that mushroom and release its spores. So that's the basics of log inoculation.
Mary asks, so we don't cover the entire log, just the holes and ends?
Yeah, yes. And if you have trouble, like you drilled in there, there's no way to get the plugs back out. So if you think you might have, I got a little piece of wire here, you can kind of do this You can kind of do this. You really want to try to make it clean, but if it sticks out a little bit, it might get contamination in there. And you'll want to just seal it as best you can all the way around it. And you see even this log has, you know, lichen, some moss and stuff. You'll get other mushrooms that'll grow in it, but you want to give the mycelium the best chance that it can to produce the mushrooms that you want. And I don't think I mentioned how important it is to get fresh logs. You want to get logs that are less than 2 weeks old if you can. So it's a really good project if you've got limbs that need to come down from trees. Hardwood works definitely the best. Poplar, some people have really good success because it's like more of a softwood. If you use a more like the oyster mushroom, real aggressive kind of strain, that would be the best shot, but yeah.
Dan asks, what kind of wax is that? Candle wax?
This is just some bulk soy wax. I think that's what it was. We bought a big bag from Amazon, but we've used beeswax in the past and haven't really noticed a difference in the output. So whatever wax is available to you.
And Jake, who is 10, asks, he wonders how mushrooms influence the rain?
Yeah, I was so glad you saw that as part of our top 10 favorite mushroom facts. Yeah, I know. There's a really good video online that will actually show you images of the spores being carried on the wind. So there's been people that have studied mushrooms that when it's the area is starting to dry up, like the weather pattern becomes more and more dry, the mushrooms will send spores into the air, and it'll actually influence that action of the water being able to condense and form droplets of rain. There's a very good video to explain it better with a lot more like science to back it up. But yeah, mushrooms can make it rain. I know. I think my favorite mushroom fact is that animals are more closely related to fungi than we are to plants. That they're much more of a kin to us. That genetically we're much more similar than we are to plants. That I hadn't expected that. It's pretty neat.
Yeah, the chat box is, yeah, people are asking questions in the chat.
Okay.
And Isabel said, can you use any log? And I think you answered that a little bit. There was something about growing textiles to make shoes.
Yeah.
Any fun facts?
Yeah, so there's quite a few companies now, but Myco Works, MYCO Works is, I think, the most front runner for being the first to really get myco textiles out there, and they look just like leather. It's made from the mycelium stage before the mushroom is, before it's grown. It's more in this stage. And it's, I don't know the species variety. I think they've cultivated a specific variety because there's even a variety of mushroom that they have infused into clothing that will actually digest human flesh as like a funeral shroud. So and the way they found it was they took mycelium in petri dishes and fed it hair and fingernails and skin like picks. And they found a strain that would actually dissolve it. I know, it's amazing. The whole world of fungi is just fascinating. That's one of the reasons we love our Facebook group. We have a Facebook group called Study Fungi, and we share articles in there all the time like this. It's just, it's mind-blowing. It really is. It's fun to learn about this. Because a lot of us don't learn about mycology in school. It's kind of wonderful that you're here to learn about it now.
How did you get into this? Isabel asks.
Yeah, so we wanted to move to a farm to have the way of life that we have now, that we really wanted. And when we moved from Northern New York, we wanted to find a niche in the farming scene that was here. And there were a couple of options, but once we realized that no one was growing mushrooms here on a larger scale, and then we started to study the science of it, we thought we really could make it work and enjoy the challenges of it, because it's been an up and down ride. We started in our garage with straw bags and, you know, plastic taped to the walls and a big humidifier in there. And it was very fun. But people also were kind of afraid of oyster mushrooms. They weren't interested in trying them. It was a little too unfamiliar. But now it's a shame when we don't have them, because so many people come to our market table and they're, oh, you don't have them? You know, they're favorites now, which is very wonderful. I also have some lion's mane too that we grew. This one is sometimes called a pom-pom mushroom. This one is it's renowned for its flavor similar to seafood and its brain health. And the way that you would cook this is there's plenty of ways, but a common way is to pull it apart and shred it and then saute it in butter and press it in the pan and tilt the pan so that liquid comes off, because sometimes it can be bitter. And use it as like a mock seafood, or add it with breadcrumbs and eggs and make like crab cakes. That is a very delicious mushroom. It tastes a lot like lobster.
Pictish1 asked, how much of the log is used? You said 6 inches down. What is it to the next row?
About the same. Yeah, about the same. So I don't know if you can see here. So the next row, I would start like this side. I would do one here, and then one here, and then one here. And so it's kind of like a grid of it. Yeah, you would do the whole entire log.
Okay.
And I had a question about the pom-poms. How do you cultivate those?
They can be done the same way. They can be done on the hardwood sawdust, or you can do them in logs. And they are also a very easily identified wild foraged one. If you're in the woods, you're usually up higher at eye level. Sometimes they can be lower on trees, but most of the time you'll see them up. And they have
yeah.
I don't know if you can see it.
Yes, we can see it. Pom-pom. That's not lion's mane, is it?
Yes, it is.
Okay. I was wondering, yes. Somebody else asked. Okay.
You have Daria's question.
Yes, I know. I couldn't find it now. Oh, here we go. I've had the mushroom logs before, but they always get moldy instead of sprouting mushrooms. What went wrong, and how to prevent this going forward?
Okay. I wonder how old your logs were. If they were fresh cut logs, that most likely wouldn't happen. And then also, where did you keep them too? They need to be kept mostly up off the ground. Like it's most common just to lean them on a tree or on a fence. Some people put them on a pallet, and it could take a while before they fruit too, like a year, 2 years, a year and a half. It definitely requires patience, but you can get a fruiting for several years after. We had a customer just send us a picture of her shiitake harvest this fall, and she inoculated her logs 3 years ago, and it's pretty neat to see. It's on our Facebook page if you're interested to see. That one was very fun.
I put the link. I didn't put the link yet, but I just put the name of the Facebook group, Study Fungi with Greenwood Farm, on the chat. A question, mushrooms can be dangerous. How can you make sure what you get is edible and discern from the weeds?
That has become our passion, because mushrooms are poisonous occasionally, and they are delicious occasionally too. They are very, very important to get to know. And the important thing is education about the details of what you're looking at. That's it. That's really it. So actually our farm motto, we've recently changed it to cultivate wisely and forage safely, because we want to help people to know this is definitely this, or I'm not sure, this is probably it, but I'm not sure, or to what to do about it. So the way that you learn mushrooms is you want to learn what to look at. You want to compare the cap, or if it has teeth, or what the underside looks like. This is pores or gills, and then how the gills are attached, how the gills are spaced, how it grows, and then what the bottom of the stem looks like. I'm hoping you were able to see that. I was kind of wiggling. So, and this is also some basic ID information there. And you can find any of this in the beginning of a guidebook. Actually, that's how Dustin and I started, was we got a guidebook from the library. And we were just amazed at how much information was in there. And we kept learning and learning. And we got this fall, Dustin became certified wild forager. And it's basically that he took a test, and now he's certain that he knows the ones that are absolutely edible. And he knows the ones that they could be harmful for some people to eat them, like the honey mushroom. Some people will eat it and it's totally fine, and some people will eat the same one and it gives them a stomach ache. So those are the ones that's like, you let people decide if they want to eat it, but the wild certified foraging is about making sure it's safe in restaurants and at sales at markets. So we like to help establish a certification program in the state of Pennsylvania, but there's other states that have it already and some that don't yet. But we think it's a really good idea. Your lot might grow some, but you'll learn what your variety will look like. Like this oyster mushroom, you see how it has the gills that come all the way down to the bottom? That's a feature of the oyster mushroom. And then the lion's mane has the teeth. Look at a few other varieties, but now you'll know what to look for when you're looking at mushrooms. It's kind of.
I have a question about Mycelium. So Mycelium are usually foraged right now, but can you cultivate them?
Yeah, you can. It's tricky, but it's definitely possible. Yeah.
What else? Let's see. Julie had a question. Would it be possible to propagate mushrooms from the spores of a wild pom-pom mushroom? Does a pom-pom have spores? Yes.
Yeah, it would be very, very tricky. That's the thing about spores, is that they could be pretty unreliable. It's not like a plant with seeds. It's much more like when you pick that mushroom, that there's a mycelial layer underneath or within the bark, within the log, that'll have it. And that's more of a reliable source of that strain that you want. The spores can change from it.
Thank you. And Isabel said, just to clarify, the log will only mushroom after it has been filled with mycelium?
Yeah, yep. It's fully inoculated and it's just going to keep eating it. And it's the same thing with the kit. This used to be all dark, like a brown color, but it's all full of mycelium now. And if whenever this tape comes off, there's holes through here that'll simulate what the hole in the bark would be like for the mushroom to grow right through. I don't think I have that. In the Mycology packet, I made them to go with the kits, and it shows you a cross section of what the kit looks like, and it's neat to imagine the mycelium growing all the way through it.
So, what health benefits, Carlin, do you have to tell us that most people don't know about in growing these different mushrooms? Like, why should we grow mushrooms?
Yeah, I think that without sounding like a snake oil pusher, because you really want to do your own research because it's very fascinating. All mushrooms are anti-cancer, and I really love that about incorporating that into meals for my family. That's been, and they're so easy to incorporate. I mean, just a handful. This is probably half a pound or a little bit less. This would be enough for 1 or 2 meals for my family, just as part of it. And that regular nourishment, I think, is really, really important for humanity right now. There's the lion mane mushroom, has a lot of health benefits for the brain. I think Paul Stamens has helped fund a lot of science about that now, about how it can clear away the plaque between neurons and actually help with preventing and reversing nerve damage and dementia. Yeah, that's a pretty amazing one. My favorite has been reishi mushroom. The double extract of that has been incredibly helpful just as a mom in life. I mean, it's helped me so much with coping with a lot less stress. that one I think would be my recommendation for beginning if you're interested in either learning how to make a double extract yourself, foraging, or trying as a tincture to incorporate in your life. That one is, I think the Chinese say there's thousands of health benefits, but the one word is vitality. Yeah,
Wow.
but there are so many wonderful mushrooms. The oyster mushroom has a lot of science about, a lot of scientific research recently that connects it with anti-breast cancer and anti-prostate cancer. And I mean, I wish that it was more commonly known too. I actually wrote to KFC because there's the chicken of the woods mushroom, and I was like, hey, this would be great for you to offer an option here, you know, because it can be cooked very similarly too, you know. So if they became more of a part of our lives, it would be wonderful.
Wow. And is it more economical for us to grow mushrooms at home than it is to buy from the grocery store?
Yeah, I would think that if you are willing to set up the right circumstances for it, I think if you lived in the desert, it would be a lot more difficult to cope with that kind of environment. But I think it would be, especially the logs, because they can produce for so long. If you had a family, that would, I think, would be the best way to go. The kits can produce anywhere from 1.5 pounds to 2 pounds of fruiting. So you have to kind of understand, like, how much does it cost for the kit and shipping, like weigh out that cost and benefit. But it is a tricky farming technique to grow on the scale that we grow. So I definitely want to thank everybody that supports their small farmers. And it helps them specialize too. When you go to the farmer's market or you buy from businesses that source their materials from small farms. I've been working on this big grant, and it has a big section for background and rationale. And I understood the local food movement before, but now I feel like I really understand it. It's about food security. I mean, if there was some reason that big farms weren't able to continue, having small farms established will really be able to help us survive and thrive again. So that's what's great. What I see now as a trend, and what we would like to help, is small farms being able to teach classes. That's what we want to do at our farm here now too. It's been wonderful to teach people how to grow mushrooms and learn basic mycology, and we'd like to offer a platform for other small farmers to come and teach all kinds of skills.
Yeah, so you've told us a little bit about your grant. Maybe the people here, I was telling them at the beginning of the webinar, if they find this valuable, I know I definitely do, I'm sure they do as well, and we want to support you. How can we, what is this grant about, and what would we be writing? What are they looking for to support, as a letter of support towards what you're aiming to do at Greenwood?
Yeah, it's all outlined on the website. There's actual like letters that you can send just to say that you think it's a good idea for the community, basically, even if you can't attend classes. That's something that would be helpful now. But I would love to keep the conversation going in our Facebook groups. We have a lot of them. We're also on all the other forms of social media. This is a big part of what we love doing, is just teaching the basics, not making mushrooms inaccessible. We like making them accessible, and we like the feeling that they're familiar and that you can have them in your lives more. We have recipes, a recipe group. We have a recipe Pinterest board that we're always on adding to. So it's a lot of good ways to keep going.
Yeah, and some people were talking about how chicken of the woods was incredible meat substitute. 2 more questions.
Okay.
How much light, well, maybe more, but how much light does an inoculated log need? And another question later on about arid temperate desert climates. But
okay.
Yeah, how much light does an inoculated log need?
Yeah, these mushrooms that would grow on the log, the oyster or shiitake is what you'd inoculate a log with. They do great with low light or indirect. You don't want direct light on them. You also want to be sure that they're not in a very windy spot, because that'll dry them out. So I'm glad that you asked that.
Okay, thank you Who asked that one?
Yeah,
Isabel.
you water them if it's to be like a really dry summer.
Mhm.
You just bring a bucket over and water them, or watering can.
And then Sandy asked, she lives in the desert, but it still rains, and I've seen mushrooms popping up outside lately. How long does it take to grow mushrooms in the desert?
I don't know. That's a really cool question. I don't know. I know that they're critical for fruiting with humidity. So I imagine if you had a fully inoculated log that you were able to keep wet, that when the humidity increased enough for those wild mushrooms to bloom, I imagine that yours would too in your log. But I imagine it wouldn't be as predictable as if you were growing in the Pacific Northwest. That's very, yeah, neat question.
Thank you. Well, so far, those are all the questions we've had in the chat. Do you have any last words for us, Carlin, or does anybody else want to unmute and ask Carlin a question?
Actually, I had another question about if you were going to, Carolyn, if you were going to make a recommendation about to somebody who wants to start out with mushrooms, which mushroom would you recommend that they start out with, and what kind would you recommend they start with, logs or with the tabletop indoor kit?
Mm-hmm. That's good. I would suggest the oyster mushroom because they are so forgiving. They're very good at growing. They're delicious, easy to incorporate. The kits, it depends on what you're interested in. The kits are so much faster, and this is basically as hard as it is. You put it on a plate next to your kitchen sink and you spray it. That's about as complicated as it gets. And when it fruits fully, that's when you want to twist it off for harvesting. The trick is to not wait too long that the caps start to spread out and become too large. You want to pick it and refrigerate it if you're not going to use it. Just pick it at the height of its growth. That's what I would suggest, is definitely the oyster mushroom to start with. And if you're interested and patient, I would encourage you to go for the logs. But if you want to just grow mushrooms to see how it goes and learn along with the process, I would suggest the Countertop Kits.
Remus has some general comments to add to the mix.
Okay.
Hey there. So yeah, very insightful overall. From my own personal experiences of doing cultivation and stuff, I just wanted to add some thoughts. So for log tech, I really prefer the angle grinder with the specialized bit rather than the drill bit. I just find that it is so fast, and you can rip up a log in no time, and plus it bottoms out automatically for whatever the size is of your dowel. So for people that want to do like 40, if you're doing one or two, the drill bit, you know, and it works, but it just takes a lot more time. And the angle grinder, there's a specific attachment that you can get and a bit. And I think Fields and Forest has it. But if you're going to do more logs, that's definitely, it's worth the investment to have those that are ready to go. The logs themselves will generally fruit for whatever the diameter is. So if you have a 4-inch log, you can get 4 years of production out of it once it's fully inoculated. So if you have a 6-inch log, you get 6 years of production. If it's an 8-inch log, you can get 8 years of production. I've been to several cultivation workshops. I'm a long-term member of the DC Mycological Association. So more focused on the foraging side, which is my passion, but lately I've gotten more into the cultivation side. And I like to do low-tech, no-tech kind of stuff outdoors. And a big fan of Peter McCoy and radical mycology. For anyone that's looking at taking cultivation to the next step and more seriously, radical mycology is a gift to the universe about, you know, understanding mycelium, being able to interact with it, and understanding, you know, how to experiment and do different things with it. For the logs too, the thing that I like to do instead of the paintbrush, I'll take the whole end of the log and just dip it right into the crock pot or whatever if I have a saucepan. Generally, I'll use a cheese wax because it melts at a low temperature and doesn't have a flaming point. You have to be very careful when you're heating your wax. Crock pot's a great idea, but I would just take the whole log end and just dip it directly right in there, as opposed to brushing it on. And then you get one constant seal, just like 1/3 of an inch up over the margin. Tends to work out really, really well. A lot of people are mycophobic, and that's I think one of the challenges that you guys mentioned from the beginning is like getting people to open their mind and understanding just that this thing is not just the anti-cancer properties, they're antimicrobial, antibacterial. Maitake help regulate blood sugar. I mean, they are true medicine that people have been using for thousands of years. And unfortunately, in our civilized society, we've kind of become detached from that importance of being connected with nature. But you cannot underestimate the nutritional powerhouse that mushrooms are. The beta glucans, polysaccharides, the other constituents. Just eating them is one step, and then doing the extracts is just a whole nother way from doing a water extract and then doing a alcohol extract and then combining that. Some people will even take what's left and they'll burn it, and then they'll extract the salts from the ash and recombine that to get these other materials that you couldn't get otherwise. But all mushrooms are magical. That's the interesting thing. I'm out foraging and stuff. It's like, are those magic mushrooms? Say, look, all mushrooms are magical. You really just can't underestimate just how amazing they are. So for logs, the most common failure with logs is lack of moisture. So letting your logs dry out, or using logs that are too old that don't have the proper moisture content. So that's stressing that, having something that's 2 weeks old, you don't want to cut a fresh tree and inoculate it right away, because the tree itself is still trying to protect itself. So you want the tree to be dead, but not to be subject to other competitors to inoculate that. So 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks is kind of the sweet spot. Definitely less than a month, but not within the first 48 to 72 hours of felling a fresh tree. You want it to not be resistant to the mycelium once you introduce it to that environment. And I think that was most of the notes that I took. Just so I wanted to just throw some additional comments out there. For lion's mane, I do have a kit that which is from Radical Mycology. So Peter McCoy started a new mushroom movement called Mycologos, and he did a Kickstarter packing, and he had his basically it's a monthly kit that you get from him with different stuff. So I happen to have some lion's mane, and it actually blew out through the filter patch that's on the bag, which is pretty interesting. I don't know if it's maybe too light. And so once I harvest this, I plan on taking the rest of the mycelium and knocking up some logs in the backyard. We have the emerald ash forest here that unfortunately decimated a lot of ash trees. So I think that might be ripe for introducing the lion's mane, which is Hericium marinaceus, which also has a lot of those neurological benefits, brain power. Paul Stamets' company, Fungi Perfecti, and Fungi Perfecti is mostly his cultivation side. Host Defense is, creating real true medicine out of this stuff. So if you have trouble concentrating, you have dementia, you have other sorts of psychological issues, it can actually help you create new neurological pathways to help you maximize your brain power. And I think that's all that I had to add, but I just wanted to throw a couple comments into the mix because it's something also that I find very exciting. And it's hard to, sometimes you feel like you're drinking from the fire hose because there's so much to learn. But I've got at least one book, one part of a bookshelf totally dedicated to mycology and different kinds of books, from local foraging to getting a field guide for your area. So definitely encourage everybody to get hands-on, get into the woods, get an oyster kit to start. When you're talking about also for propagation, so you can get an oyster kit from this farm, and the fruit itself is a genetic mirror image of the mycelium. So if you take a tissue sample from the oyster, you could take that and put that into an agar plate, or you could take it and put it into liquid culture, and have that same strain, and then be able to work with that. It is very important once you have a strain that you do keep it running. Paul Stamets' book, Mycelium Running, is that you do want to keep mycelium in an active state of growth. It does experience cell senescence. It does get bored very easily if you feed it the same thing, or if you let it starve. It does go through cellular death, and once it goes through senescence, there's no real way to wake it back up. It's just giving up the ghost and all of its gusto. So when you do have fresh dowels and stuff, then they're inoculated, they're thirsty to get into fresh wood. If you let them sit around for a couple of years, they will lose their vigor and their vitality. So make sure when you get dowels to work with, that you put them into fresh wood and keep the mycelium running. And if you feed it, it'll feed you.
Thank you, Remus. Remus is a good friend who is passionate mycologist, not yet.
At least I play one on TV, I guess. A lot of people seem to think that. I mean, there's just so many people that I feel like I just have like a drop in the bucket of knowledge compared to people like, Gary Linkoff and other true mycologists, people that like with our club, one of the guys that helps run Mushroom Observer. It's just like I feel that I have so much to learn. I have a lot to teach from my own practical experience, but I feel like it's such a slippery slope. Once you get into it, it's just there's no limit, and we don't even know what we don't know. So I mean, this is like the cool thing about this science is, it is mushroom science. There is a tremendous amount of new just opportunities to develop new things, to develop strains and train them to respond to certain environments. You introduce, some sort of source of them and get them to develop the enzymes, and then they're able to fruit on that substrate, or, you condition them to do what you want to do for bioremediation. You could, clean up oil spills. You can, you can filter out water. You can just, reduce contaminants. I mean, you can clean up nuclear environments. I mean, mushrooms are, they're hyperaccumulators of whatever's in their environment. So, and on that note, if we're talking about foraging, like you don't want to, if you have a lion's mane that's growing right on the side of a highway, it's probably not the best one to harvest to consume, because it'll have some of those toxins from the environment that it's exposed to. So you do want to be careful, even picking choice edible mushrooms from the side of the road if it's heavily traveled. If it's a dirt road through the woods, or it's a rarely traveled road, then you don't have to sweat it. But yeah, they are magical, mysterious creatures that I think we all have the pleasure to just learn and appreciate.
Thank you. And then I'm going through the questions again. For Carlin, Sharon asks, how long does a countertop oyster kit take to harvest?
It depends what the date set for fruiting would be, but it could take up to 2 weeks, or maybe 3. It could be a month. But this one here is fully pollinated, so it probably would only be about a week before it would start to fruit, and then 2 weeks before harvest.
Okay. Molly Oakley asks, what is the watering regime for an inoculated lug? Did I ask that already? I think I already asked that. And if I did, sorry. Oops, Carlin. I think we lost her for a bit.
I mean, you want to keep your logs moist at all times. Don't let them dry out, but don't get them too wet. So you don't really, if it's hot and dry, you just would kind of spray them down. When I knock up my logs, I put them on like a pallet, and I'll stack them on top of each other. And then, in the summertime, I'll water that lightly once a week. You can also water it and put like, I use one of these compostable trash bags that I get from Mom sometimes if I get clippings for my chickens, and we'll just put that on top, and it'll help me maintain moisture. Again, the number one cause for log failure is loss of moisture, letting your logs dry out and the mycelium dying in the process. when the one person commented about the log molding, I'm curious to learn more about what was, what actually happened. Because I mean, is it mold on the outside? Are you seeing if there's, it wasn't really clear about what happened, because usually there'll be some other competitor fungi that comes in there, whether it's turkey tail or something else that grows on there that will consume that wood. So they don't generally mold on their own. So I don't know if they could clarify that question from before, that would be interesting.
Well, thanks so much, Remus. I think we lost connection with Carlin right now. And Jake, I see your hand is up. We see you. I'm going to ask your question next once Carlin comes in. But Dave, do you see her having a hard time getting into the room again? You want to resend her that link?
She's not sending me any emails or anything. So I think she either lost her connection or...
Yeah, so Remus, you mentioned but not getting them too wet. Is that because if you get them too soggy, then you wipe out the air of the mushrooms? If your log is too wet?
Well, I mean, it's okay. So it's hard to have them too wet. You don't want them to be submerged in water where that would go anaerobic and that the mycelium would actually not have the ability to breathe. But you can't really, if you water them every day, it wouldn't hurt you to do that. It's not necessary to go to that extreme. You just want to make sure they don't dry out. Often to initiate fruiting, you'll actually soak your log and you'll submerge it for 24 hours in order to maximize moisture content and to maximize the amount of pinning and fruit development right before you want to initiate a harvest. So you can't really, if they were in an area where it was raining every day, they would be fine. It'd be far preferred to do that than to have them in an environment where they could dry out. But it's not necessary to do it that much. The thing is, you want to keep them out of direct sunlight. You don't want them to be, in an area that's really gusty. Leaning them against trees where they have some shade, some protection, some natural kind of microclimate where they stay moist would be ideal.
All right. Okay, we don't have Carlin back yet, but I just wanted to thank you, Remus, for sharing that and to answer some of the questions.
And I'm happy to help, answer any other questions that anyone has while we're waiting, just to kind of keep the time.
Right. Jake, do you want to ask your question? I think, yeah. So what's your question?
What inspired the mushroom lady to start mushroom farming?
Oh, that's a good one. I wish you were here. What is your interest in mushrooms, Jake? What did you, what got you interested in mushrooms?
The fact that they go wonderfully in omelets.
Oh, different mushrooms grow in different months, I think. Yeah, I wanted also to ask that to Carlin. We'll wait and see if she gets back. And actually, she has also the key to the giveaway that we're giving tonight, because she has to ask everyone a question, and the first one to answer her mushroom question is supposed to get a mushroom spawn kit from Greenwood Farm. But she just, so it's interesting. But I will get back to you. That's a good question, Jake, to ask. Me, go ahead, and if you could mute yourself, if I haven't not muted you. And then we'll wait for so while we're waiting, I'm going to share my screen on Greenwood Farms website, if some of you haven't seen that yet, and their Facebook group, while we wait for Carlin to come on. So here is their greenwoodfarm.info. They're super, here we go. What we do, they have one market, they service 2 restaurants and 3 products, and definitely doing education. So here's that little link that Carlin was saying about their letter of support for their USDA grant. We hope you can click on that, and then you could join their Facebook group called Study Fungi with Greenwood Farm, where they talk more. A lot of people send their mushroom pictures, and then they comment on it, and just a lot of good mushroom conversation going on here about people getting their kits and growing them. And here, like this one's an interesting one, how trees secretly talk to each other in the forest. The thing about mushrooms is where Dave and I were commenting, once you start studying mushrooms, you start studying trees, because certain mushrooms like to grow around certain trees. They have associations with them. So that's all I have to say for now. Okay, there, Daria. Daria said, and then you had a question.
So on the mold, so let's talk about the log getting moldy. Okay, so when you say moldy, what do you mean? Does the outside of the log have trichoderma growing on it? Are you seeing a blue-green mold on the outside of the bark? In which case, if that's not necessarily a problem, you just want to be able to, if the log is still hard and something else has not started to decompose the lignins and the cellulose in the wood, then the shiitake or whatever you inoculated with could still be alive, and you just have a mold growing on the outside of the log. Generally the molds that people refer to, trichoderma, which is the blue-green mold that we're most familiar with, grows on bread, will not consume the wood. They will feast on bacteria that's on the outside of the log on the bark, but they will not actually compete with a wood-loving mushroom like oyster or lion's mane or shiitake. So those logs could still be active and could be viable if there's mold growing on the outside. That's not necessarily a bad thing. It may mean that the moisture content is too high, or they're exposed to an environment. Like I would only have logs in the inside during winter where it's really, really dry and it's hard to maintain moisture. Someone else asked a question about like what season to do it. It's really spring, summer, or fall are the best seasons. Winter is a little dry in general. The air tends to be drier in the winter. So it's harder to control humidity and to control the log moisture in the winter than it would be in the spring, summer, or fall.
Link not working. Dave, do you mind sending her the link again?
No, this was before she.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I think she's just having trouble getting back on. So I think it's at this point, it's probably something a little more severe.
All right. So should we ask the, I guess the mushroom question, Dave? Do you want to ask the mushroom question that would? We have about 4 more minutes, so I think 4 more minutes for anybody else to, let's see. If you're keeping it on the side, I think we got, I was wondering if there will be a replay available. Yes, Lynn, there will be a replay available. I am recording this right now, but give me some time, because right after this, I'm gonna hit the sack, because how would we go about growing lion's mane? I think Remus answered that question. What is the best way? Dan Beneski asks, what is the best way to go about growing other mushrooms than oysters, and how would we go about growing lion's mane?
So for lion's mane, assuming that you want to do something outside, you could do totems. So lion's mane is a little bit harder to inoculate into a log like you would shiitake or oyster. They just tend to be more aggressive on an oak log. But if you take so totem techniques is basically taking larger pieces of wood, much wider pieces, but thinner, say 4 to 6 inches tall, but could be 12 to 18 inches wide, and cutting a clean surface and filling the top of that with mycelium, and then sandwiching another piece of wood on top of that, and then another piece of wood on top of that, and another piece of wood on top of that. So you could have four chunks of wood about 6 inches tall, going overall about 2 feet, and having all of the spaces between them sandwiched with mycelium.
Can I stay here? Yeah.
Oops, let me just.
I guess I don't need the phone. Okay.
Oh, sorry, Jake. I'm trying to find you and mute you out.
Because you want me to mute myself?
Yes, sir. Thank you. Oh, okay. So, Miss Carlin's and what? So Miss Carlin's phone died, but I'm talking to her on Facebook. Let me see if she might reply to it. But I will forward your question, Jake, to her about it, and I'm sure she will send you an email about what else. She talked about it a little bit earlier, saying that they wanted to live the life that they wanted to live, being in their farming business and moving to Millville, Pennsylvania, but then they wanted to find a niche, which is a little pocket in the growing space, in the farming space, where people were not growing something. So what was it that they found that people were not growing? It was mushrooms. And they fell in love with just learning about mushrooms and started to grow them. So that was how she got into the Greenwood farm. Okay, Daria says, thanks. It was a kind of white mold. It happened with 2 different log kits, actually about 2 to 3 weeks. That is all that I could see growing. No hints of any mushrooms. That's right.
So when you're saying log kits, so usually logs and kits are 2 different things. Kits are going to be a nutrified sawdust block, and a log is actually a piece of a tree. So when I have a feeling that you're probably referring to a kit that probably had some mold growing on it. Is that correct?
She's in the chat, so if you look at the chat, you must.
Yeah, no, we'll wait for her to reply on. I mean, or if she has a mic, we could just discuss it if she wants to just chime in on that.
Hey, I guess I can unmute. Sorry, much easier this way. Thanks. Yeah. Sorry, can you repeat your question? Yeah.
So it was probably a kit, not a log, right?
Yeah, it was some kind of kit. I thought that it was like a real log in the kit, but truthfully, it was a number of years ago. Somebody gave me one, and then it didn't work. And then I called the company and got a replacement, and then that one didn't work as well. And then I just got burned out and tired and annoyed with with this whole possibilities.
No problem. I think we can get down to the bottom of it. Now we understand.
Yeah. So kits aren't really logs, even though it looked like a log to me enough that I would have said that it was a log. But as I think of like the logs that are decomposing in the backyard or the things I see on hikes now, like it certainly didn't have that kind of.
Well, logs have a layer of bark around them.
Right.
So did this have a bag? Did it come in a plastic bag?
I think it probably did. I just remember like keeping it like. I think it was like in a kind of like a dish of water or something to try to keep it moist, like to keep moisture coming in from the bottom or something. It was asking. It was different than like somebody gave me one a handful of years back that was like more in a box, a bag within a box, and then that you kind of make slits in, and then that one actually ended up growing on its own.
Okay, so with the kits, you don't want to submerge them in water. They're not like plants where it would wick up moisture. That could create mold if you put a kit in direct contact with water for a prolonged basis. If you did that short term for like 12 hours, it wouldn't be a big deal. But if you had a kit sitting in water, that could create a moldy response.
So even if just the bottom's in water, that would create.
You would not want to have the bottom of the kit in water. You want to mist it. You want it to maintain a humid environment. Kits already come hydrated, so when they're created and the kits are put together. Usually, it's a nutrified sawdust. So using sawdust or adding various. They may be using gypsum. They may be using other recipes as part of their nutrified sawdust block. And they'll add other ingredients to add different minerals and to help promote fruiting and biological efficiency. It's a recipe that they come up with to create this kit. So yeah, you would never want to have that in contact with water for a prolonged period of time. If it dried out severely, it was really dry, I'd say, soak it for 12 hours, maybe it'll wick some of that up, but never, you would never want to have it standing in water, any portion of the log, because that part will go anaerobic and the mycelium in that area will die. that will become a contamination vector, and that will invite other competitive molds to come in. So that's likely your problem. Sometimes with store-bought kits, depending on the cultivator, they could have issues with the strain. It could be that that batch of bags didn't get sterilized completely. It's not anything that has 100% guarantee. There's failure ratios that happen. The recipe could have been off. Something could have happened with their equipment. Could have been, contaminants introduced in the in the kit preparation process. I think any one of those things. But yeah, never submerge any type of mycelium in water for a prolonged period of time.
Yeah, great. Thank you.
Okay, I have a question now from Carlin, and the first one to answer gets the spawn plugs, 100 spawn plugs of blue oyster mushrooms shipped to them. Sorry, came in from the garden.
Pick me.
No, you're not included, Remus.
I'm kidding.
Okay. Okay, here's the question. Oh no, now I lost it. What forms the mycelium? Type it in the chat box, and the first one to answer gets the spawn plugs. Yay, Sharon! Okay, so Sharon, the root of the mushroom. Yes, I face the root of the mushroom, I guess. Sharon, you have to send Carlin at Greenwood, Greenwood Mushroom Farm, your address, your mailing address, and they will send you the blue oyster, 100 blue oyster plugs spawn plugs. So thank you guys tonight. Thank you especially Remus for covering for the last questions. Thank you most especially Carlin and Greenwood Farm. Oh, you're so welcome everyone. Thank you. This is great. This is like a community of growers coming together online. The replay will be up tomorrow, God willing. And we will keep sending your questions, and feel free to send them to post them on the Facebook group. Remus, you have a Facebook page as well, right? And Study Fungi with Greenwood Farm is the Facebook group too, that we wanted to tell you to join as well. We're a part of that. And yeah, so.
Yeah, and everyone that's here, if they could maybe just do a quick plug for Greenwood on that grant thing. I think that will help them continue to push their mission forward. It does take a village, and this is, there's a lot of time and effort and commitment that goes into doing this. And I think that this is important work that benefits us all. And it's hard work. It's something, I find it have a battle myself between foraging and just going to the woods and letting Mother Nature provide versus, trying to work with the mycelium. So, please support the work that they're doing, and, having taken the time even to set this up and work with permaculture gardens to make this information available is phenomenal. So, I plan on doing it. If everybody could just try to give them a quick plug and support them so that they can continue to push for more grants, increase their operations, continue educating people. The certified foraging program, that sounds phenomenal. So, get out there and help them out.
Yeah, thanks so much. Thanks so much, Remus, for those good words. Dustin wasn't able to join us because he's got a fever and their kids do too. So it's amazing that Carlin is still standing strong. But thank you. We'll close out the evening. Grow abundantly, everyone, and have a good night.